The movie begins with the story of a drug cartel who is about to be executed. He was a big whale of a drug kingpin mafia from Mexico, and he was going to be executed in America because he had been caught there. The execution was witnessed by a member of the CIA named Doc and also a newly elected governor named Richard. The executioners then told the man to deliver his final message. The mob kingpin then said, if this was not the end of everything, but this was the beginning of their destruction. A few moments later, the killing fluid began to be injected into his body, and within a few minutes, the man was dead. Later that same evening, Doc was joined by his CIA co-worker Billy. While sitting together, they accidentally saw a news report on TV that broadcast about the executed cartel boss. New fact is revealed. It turns out that Doc and also Billy are former subordinates of the cartel boss, but they both decided to stop being members of the mafia and choose a career as a law enforcer. They also saw Richard on the TV. The governor was giving a speech discussing the execution, and it turned out that Richard was also a former mobster who was also friends with the cartel boss. From their conversation, it was also revealed that Richard managed to be elected as the governor in a dirty way. He even did not hesitate to kill people to get his power. Cut to Mexico. The cartel boss's young wife was devastated by the news of her husband's death. She went out to see her son, Lalo, who was also devastated by his father's passing. A few moments later, Lalo spoke to his brother Cuco. Cuco said that the Americans had looked down on them terribly, and even after killing their father, the American police were planning to destroy their business. Lalo then said that Richard, the governor, had betrayed them. They used to be friends, but now Richard was casually watching and announcing their father's execution. Cuco then intended to go to America to hunt Richard down and the people who had been involved in his father's death. The scene returns to America. A young girl was walking alone, and the girl turned out to be Doc's daughter. A moment later, Doc told her to get in the car, and they quickly drove away. The two of them then made a stop at a donut shop to enjoy donuts together. The young girl's name was Nellie. They chatted casually for a while. From their conversation, it was found out that Doc and Nellie's mother had divorced and his ex-wife had married someone else. Afterward, Doc drove Nellie to her school. Later at his house, Doc was getting ready to go somewhere. It happens that he goes to the drug headquarters where he used to work. Although he has now become a member of the law enforcement, he continues to protect this illicit business. One of the gang leaders intended to deliver the goods later that night, and Doc told them not to worry, because he would always guarantee their safety. Elsewhere, Cuco had arrived in America and was casually smoking at a gas station. A staff member tried to remind him to put out his cigarette, but Cuco felt completely blameless and ignored the man. Moving on to Doc, who was going to meet one of his friends that night. Not long after, Billy came up to greet them, then Doc invited Billy to talk on the roof of the building. Doc then asked Billy to convey her message to Richard, for him to stop his portrayal as a hero of exterminating drug cartels, when in fact the cartels were their friends when they used to work as dealers. But Billy insisted that there was no way Richard would stop portraying himself, because the people had already judged him to be a great leader. Doc then said that he was just worried that the other mobsters would hunt him down. Later on, Doc met Richard's assistant named Clark. Doc asked Clark to get him to meet Richard, but Clark refused. Doc finally had to force him to call Richard. A few moments later, Richard came to see them. Billy then told Richard that his act of impersonation really jeopardized his safety, because the Mexican cartels were not random people, they could come and hunt them all down. But Richard said, now that he was the governor, he had the power and there was no way the Mexican mafia would be able to fight him. Before he left, Richard then approached Doc, and for the umpteenth time, Doc warned Richard to immediately stop what he was doing, because he could not guarantee his safety and also his family. But Richard said that Doc didn't need to worry about him. The next day, Doc called Billy, but there was no answer. Out of concern, Doc then decided to go to Billy's house. After knocking on Billy's door several times, there was no response at all, and he decided to get to the house. When he went inside, he found Billy and one of her friends had been shot dead. Doc began to realize that someone from Mexico had been sent to finish them all off. Afterward, Doc headed to the drug headquarters, and there he saw Cuco, who had just arrived from Mexico. The mafia chief gave Doc his share of the security money. Doc suspected that Cuco was the one who had killed Billy and her friend. A little while later, the police came to raid the place and a shootout ensued. Doc, who had just received the security money, had to participate in killing the policeman. Cuco, the mobster's son, also joined in shooting the cops. Once it was safe, Doc, who feared he would be caught by the police, quickly left. Back to Richard. Richard had just landed in his helicopter, and he met some officials from the police. They reported that they had just finished raiding a drug base in his city, and they also managed to confiscate some money and all the drugs from the place. They also knew about Billy's death, and they were worried about Richard's safety. However, Richard told them not to worry about him. Afterwards, Clark tried to prevent Richard from holding a press conference, but Richard was still going to do it and announced about his success in raiding the drug base. Thereafter, Clark got into the car and intended to go home, but who would have thought, Kuko was waiting for him in his car. Kuko then tied his hands, so Clark couldn't do anything. Kuko then got out of the car and put fire into the tank of Clark's car, and Clark could only surrender, unable to do anything because his hands were tied. Shortly after Kuko left, the car exploded with Clark inside. The next day, while enjoying his meal, Doc was suddenly called by Kuko. Kuko said that Nellie, his daughter, was currently with him. Of course, Doc was very surprised to hear that. Doc then asked what Kuko wanted, that he had kidnapped his daughter, Nellie. Kuko then said that he wanted Doc to do a job for him. He wanted Doc to bring the head of Richard, the governor, to him, otherwise he would kill Nellie. Doc reluctantly agreed to do this in order to save his daughter. Doc then went to his ex-wife's house. Doc then told her that Nellie, their daughter, was kidnapped by Kuko, the Mexican mafia. Upon hearing this, Doc's ex-wife was very worried about her daughter's condition, and she asked Doc to take responsibility for all of this. Doc told her that he would do anything to save Nellie. Afterwards, Doc went to a man and intended to buy some weapons. After selecting some weapons, he ordered a chainsaw. The man was quite surprised at that, and he gave Doc the chainsaw he asked for. In the evening, while Kuko was at a cafe, he was enjoying a drink and a performance by a transgender entertainer. It turned out that Kuko had a sexual disorder. He actually enjoyed the same sex. A little while later, the transvestite, who seemed to like Kuko, approached him, and without further ado, Kuko then invited the transvestite to enter the room to spend the night with him. Elsewhere, Doc had arrived at Richard's residence. At that time, Doc saw a woman enter Richard's room. It turned out that the woman was Richard's mistress. After chatting for a while, Richard and the woman make love together. Outside, Doc began to move and finished off the guards. After eliminating the guards, Doc then entered Richard's room and immediately shot Richard's mistress, who was just finishing putting on her clothes. Afterwards, Doc found Richard in the bathroom. Richard was very surprised to see Doc holding a gun. Doc then said that his daughter, Nellie, was currently being held hostage by Kuko, the Mexican mobster, and he wanted Richard's head as collateral. At first, Richard thought Doc was joking, but he was not, and without further ado, he shot him dead.
At the lake, Billy's house.
Once Richard was dead, Doc searched the closet for a bag in which to store Richard's head. Doc began to cut off Richard's head with a chainsaw, and then he immediately rushed away from there, taking Richard's head with him. Cut back to Kuko, who has just enjoyed a night out with his companion. He then got a call from Doc, who told him that he had brought Richard's head. Kuko then told Doc the address of the hotel where he was staying. After finishing the call, Kuko went back into his room and found out that his boyfriend had accidentally seen Nellie in the bathroom. Kuko was forced to beat up his boyfriend, as he didn't want any witnesses to his crimes. After killing his friend, Kuko then brought out the dead body, and some hotel visitors accidentally saw it. He then threw the body into the trash can like it was an animal. In the meantime, Doc was on his way to the hotel with Richard's head. A few moments later, Kuko offered some food to Nellie, so that she wouldn't starve. Nellie then asked why Kuko was so mean to everyone. Kuko then told her that his mother was a prostitute who was often insulted by others, so since he was a child, he always beat and also killed people who insulted his mother, so until now killing people is a common thing for him. Afterwards, Kuko saw a crowd of people outside who were already aware of what he did. He then decided to leave the hotel as soon as possible, and Nellie was forced into the trunk of the car. An upset Kuko began to kill everyone in the hotel.
No, please.
The next morning, Doc arrived at the hotel, and he was surprised to see so many police officers there. Doc already suspected that the chaos was Kuko's doing. He then asked one of the hotel's residents what had happened, and the man said that a criminal had taken a girl away to the south. From the man's information, Doc was convinced that Kuko had taken Nellie to Mexico. Kuko had arrived at his base with Nellie in tow. Kuko's brother, Lalo, scolded him for bringing a hostage to their base. He said that Kuko had gone too far, especially since the girl was Doc's daughter who would definitely be looking for her. Kuko then fell silent, and he told his brother to calm down, because he could handle all this. Back to Doc, who was on his way to Mexico. As the story goes, he finally reached their base carrying Richard's head. Doc was then invited to sit down inside their base, and then Lalo opened the bag containing the head. Doc then asked where his daughter was, and he told Lalo to release his daughter because he had brought the head they asked for. But instead of releasing Nellie, Lalo and Cuco broke their promise. They planned to kill Doc and his daughter so that there would be no witnesses to their crimes. A few moments later, Doc and Nellie are brought out by Cuco and one of his men, to be killed. Before killing them, Cuco apologized to Nellie. When they were both about to be executed, Doc, who was experienced, immediately put up a fight. After a long fight, Cuco finally died in Doc's hands. Afterwards, they immediately rushed to escape. Doc then began to kill the mafia crew inside the headquarters, and he then told Nellie to hide in the bathroom, and he also gave her a gun to protect herself. After successfully eliminating everyone, out of nowhere, Lalo pointed a gun at Doc, but unexpectedly Lalo was shot by Nellie from the back. Once everything was safe, they immediately left the place, and finally Doc managed to bring Nellie home safely. On their way home, Doc stopped his car and got out of his car to throw Richard's head into the lake. The end.